Thank you for joining us on the Ultimate Leadership Podcast. Now, here he is, your host, Chris Cebollero.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, once again, it's time for the Ultimate Leadership Podcast. I have got to tell you, am I excited? I got to say that all the time, right? Ain't I excited every time we do a show? And anytime I have the opportunity to come and share a little bit of my knowledge with you, it is such a great honor, and I am just humbled that you are listening to the show and actually coming back. I mean, you figure I get you one show and I got to get you to come back, but you're doing it. You know, so the days of COVID, man, what does it mean for us as leaders? What does it mean for us as entrepreneurs? And we're really kind of seeing a lot of stress, and we're kind of seeing a lot of disassociation. But, you know, when we think about it from the standpoint of being leaders and role models and mentors, we really have to find a way to kind of bust out of that. And my next guest, and I got to tell you, I mean, she's Wonder Woman. She should have actually been in the Wonder Woman movie.
That's my dream.
There it is. She's a dream. But Eleanor Beaton, she's an award-winning entrepreneur. She has a great podcast. If you're not a fan, she's a keynote speaker, but more importantly, she is a women's leadership development mentor. And I am so excited to have her back on the show. Eleanor, I want to thank you for joining us on the Ultimate Leadership Podcast.
I'm so excited to be here again and connect and chat with you again.
You know, I've followed you. I mean, you've been on this about your third or fourth time that you've been on the show, and I've followed you for many years now, and your growth and your footprint is just growing, and I'm so excited for you because truly you have the conceptualization and the vision as a mentor that you are truly putting people on the path to their ultimate success, and I'm just excited to be a fan and, more importantly, to be a friend.
Exactly. Well, we need each other now more than ever. You know, we need each other to kind of talk through our ideas, to share them, and to know that there's other people out there in the trenches with us, you know, doing the good work. So thank you.
And here's one of the things that I do want to point on is, Eleanor, is that you focus on, you're a woman, you're, for the female professionals out there, you're the person that they turn to for their success, right? But the work that you do just isn't, for the female professional. I mean, I get a lot of value out of the things that you are sharing, out of the things on your podcast. I'm a fan of the show. I haven't listened in a couple months, to be honest with you, and I apologize.
I forgive you.
That's right. I got a few I'll need to catch up on. But it resonates, right? And it's good that when you have a following that they're able to use you as a role model, they're able to use you as a mentor. But I don't want the people that are out there who may not be on the female professional side of the business to think that the value that you add to people just isn't one way. And like I said, I think that you really transcend and a mentor for everyone.
You know, I so appreciate that. And it's interesting because I actually do so many of the people that I work with. So the women that I work with who are married to men, I will have a lot of interaction, conversations with both the women and their partners, because you're so right. Like the things that we're talking about here are principles. Obviously, from my perspective, I tend to focus more on serving women and working with women, but to be perfectly frank, what the stuff that we are talking about and sharing today is applicable to both.
And I have to agree with you 100%. Well, I do want to talk a little bit about the research that we're seeing. I mean, this time of COVID is really kind of crazy, right? We're getting ready to start the second year of this. We really kind of talked about the new year where we started to have to worry about this. And then we're in the February, March timeframe where this really kind of took hold. And now we're starting to see more and more data, more and more research, if you will, that's really talking about the disproportionate effects on the female professional in this time of COVID. And I'd really like to get into that discussion with you.
Well, here's the deal. Anybody who's in sort of the coaching or leadership development space, March comes around. I have vivid memories of the NBA shuts down. I'm a massive NBA fan. The Toronto Raptors, who are my team, are killing it, and it gets shut down. That's when I knew. I was like, wow, this is getting really real. So March, April, May was a period of shock, of panic, but everybody kind of had that adrenaline. They had reserves, they had adrenaline to be able to get them through. So we move into June, July, August, and we think we're adjusting. Everybody's talking about the new normal. Everyone is talking about recovery. Now, what I started noticing towards the end of August and early September is many of the women that I was working with, they were starting to talk about feeling overwhelmed. They were starting to talk about feeling just an overall lack of energy. And what has happened as research is now being released, so these are global surveys of men and women that have taken place in August and September, what they are finding in one study, for instance, from CARE, which is a nonprofit international aid organization, they did a survey of 10,400 men and women globally. And what they found were concerning increases in the amount of sort of mental health problems in everybody. Women were much more likely to be affected by mental health challenges. And so that's everything from loss of appetite, loss of ambition, feeling sort of aimless, to sort of full-blown anxiety and depression. That's what we were seeing. And so in March, April, in the first wave, people were feeling fearful. Now they're feeling hopeless. There's a sense of hopelessness. And as I started talking about this with my community of women leaders from all over the world, I was hearing these are women who are highly educated, highly successful. They are leading teams of people, sometimes global teams. And this is what they're saying, Chris: I feel despondent. I feel like my feet are heavy. I can't get out, just feel like my feet are bricks. I don't have any motivation. And because they're leaders, they're piling on top of that some self-judgment. Well, if I were a great leader, if I were a true motivator of people, I shouldn't be feeling this way. I should be able to get myself out of it. So from my perspective, in some ways, what we're seeing now is more of a cause for alarm than what we were seeing in March and April.
I got to tell you, I mean, this is very interesting stuff. And as you're talking about it, it's making me think to the standpoint of why are they feeling personally affected? Because, you talk about a lot of the senior leaders, you do deal with leaders across the board of position. Certainly you have a global footprint as well. But when you think about this from maybe the senior leader standpoint, are they taking it personally in the sense that they can't guide their organization? Or is this really the mental well-being of the person to say, I just don't like what's happening in my world? Because it would seem that the ability to lead the way that they were used to leading is causing them the challenge to say, am I failing my organization?
Yeah. Well, so this is interesting. So I first heard about this research on Brené Brown's podcast. And so she referenced a powerful article that was published in Medium. It's called "Your Surge Capacity is Depleted, and That's Why You Feel Awful." And so this research into people who work in the area of disaster relief and that kind of thing, so they are solving problems and fixing and trying to maintain after crisis has happened, they find that at about 6 months, people start to hit a wall. And that is when the energy reserves of rebuilding, of trying to navigate the uncertainty, of trying to hold it down, and maintain as much consistency and normalcy as you can in a world that is completely different and will never be the way that it was again. We'll never get back to those blithe times of January, 2020. But that surge capacity has about a 6-month window. And after that, that's when you're kind of out of adrenaline. And so I think this is what the leaders are experiencing. And so when you have kind of hit that, when you've when your surge capacity, your ability to kind of rise to the occasion is done, that's when you are in a state as a leader in particular where you don't feel like you have energy. You don't feel, it's sometimes hard to look at the big picture and at the future vision. And so this is what even people like, Michelle Obama talked about on her podcast, experiencing sort of low-grade depression. Brené Brown talked about how for weeks she'd been feeling like when she just couldn't get out of bed. When she did, each of her feet felt like it weighed 40 pounds. So these are people who are leading significant organizations. And I think it's something very personal that impacts how they see their ability to lead groups of people.
I think you've been good really to kind of point out what people are feeling. I mean, how about tips? What can I do about it? I mean, because really when we think about this in this time of COVID, I think that it's the uncertainty, that's giving us the anxiety, that's leading to the stress, that's
Mhm.
making us sick, that's making us depressed. And we think about that from the physiological standpoint of how the body works, but now, I mean, what tips are you giving your folks? I mean, so
Yeah.
if you know that this is a challenge, you're definitely the solution for them to kind of get them over the hump. I mean, what advice do you have for the listeners?
Mm. I love this question. So I think the first thing is most leaders, I don't know if you can relate to this, I'm sure you can, are like 2-day bounce back people. So if something really bad happens, it's going to take you about 2 days, to bounce back. That's just typically how so many leaders are. And what we're seeing now is that they don't have quite that capacity. So here's tip number 1. Understand and have patience, like be okay being like the 80% version of yourself. So where there seems to be, so it's really sort of embracing stoicism. And what I mean by that is, the Stoics understood it was all about managing their expectations. And I think a lot of leaders believe that they need to be at 100% to be effective. And the challenge is that getting to that 100% and staying at that 100%, that's what the research is telling us is proving to be difficult for people generally right now. So the big thing that I would say is understand that allow yourself to be at that 80% without being in a rush to feel better, without expecting that you should be feeling better than you are. So that's tip number 1. The second thing, and this is huge for leaders, and this comes to another piece of research. Now, I'm based in Canada, and this was released in Canada, but I am almost certain that these statistics would hold true south of the border and around the world as well. An organization called Hayes Recruiting, which does a major research project every year that looks into the well-being of employees. They were so alarmed by what they found. They released their research 2 months early. And what they discovered was in the wake of COVID, particularly beginning in September, there opened up a massive divide between bosses and employees. So here's what I'm saying. What they found was that 52% of Canadians were seriously considering quitting their jobs, even though jobs are much harder to get. And everything from remote work, the kind of challenges that I'm talking about, they were really finding them to be difficult. Meanwhile, a lot of leaders are doing everything that they can to ensure the performance of their organization so that those same employees still have a job. So the next thing that I would sort of emphasize for leaders in particular is understand and give yourself a huge amount of grace that you are not feeling 100%, and really hold space for your team to also, to acknowledge that they also might not be feeling 100%. They also might be struggling. And that if there's a way for you to connect with them, to dig deep, to provide a listening ear or some support to your team could pay huge dividends, to the overall strength of your team over time. And I've certainly seen this, myself, and have really tried to pay extra attention to the well-being of my team members.
We talk about employee engagement and how important it is. And in this time of pandemic, it's even more important to make sure that we're inspiring, to make sure that we're motivating, to make sure that we are engaging, and that's leading to the satisfaction of the worker. One of the things that we have to think about is that there are a lot of people now who are using this as an opportunity to change career fields and move into different areas. And it's up to the leader now to make certain that they're keeping those high performers, re-recruiting those high performers back into the organization. But Eleanor, you bring up some really great points. I do want to switch gears with you a little bit. So when we talk about a radical connection, because I think that this is kind of dovetailing into what we're talking about, I think that we're kind of in a area of flux now where we have to kind of change our relationships to connect with our workforce differently. And I know that this is an area of expertise for you. Can you kind of give us, kind of lead us in this discussion?
Absolutely. And that is, and it's so interesting because one of the things that I have found to be just a huge, like a fun silver lining of this whole experience was, I'll give you an example. A couple months ago, I'm listening to the chief economist from one of our major banks give an update on the economy. And he's doing it. And in the background, you can see, well, where is he? Oh, he's sitting in his bedroom. He's obviously sitting like at his dresser. I don't know why the chief economist, who I'm sure has an amazing salary, is choosing to do this meeting, this update, this open update to thousands of people across the country on his economic update from his bedroom. But that was his choice. But what it does is it means that we have some of the armor that we've typically had. Some of that separation, between our professional work identity and who we really are is starting to kind of release. And what this opens up an opportunity for is radical connection. And if you really want to be able to influence and move and inspire, it's your own radical conviction. And so what I mean by that is, from a radical connection standpoint, it is this: when people are feeling uncertain and confused, we look to strong leadership. So strong leadership is more important than ever before. And we are also looking for not only sort of strong, like strongman, tactical kind of energy. What we're really looking for are those leaders who we feel we can trust, who we feel we can connect with, and whom we feel we can enter into a relationship with, So I think that this is a tremendous opportunity for people to be leveraging the power of storytelling, to be thinking about not just what do I need people to do, but how can I take a moment at the beginning of these Zoom meetings to connect, to have fun, to share a joke, to maybe ask people around a Zoom meeting, before we get started, a team update, let's just take 20 seconds each. Why don't you share something about yourself that maybe we don't know about you? Just these opportunities for connection are so powerful, and people are yearning for them right now. It's a huge opportunity.
I should have started with a joke then, Eleanor. So
I know.
Why do bees have sticky hair?
I don't know. Why?
Because they use a honeycomb.
Oh my God.
No, is that not good? Okay.
No.
I'll work on the jokes. But I do want to kind of shift. So when we think about this from this connection, what do we got to know? Because, we talk about communication being the most important tool in the leader's toolbox, right? The ability to make people feel like they're part of the community. But in this world now of this virtual, you talk about an icebreaker of tell us something you don't know about yourself. One of the things that I always ask people is, what's the first concert you went to? What year was it? The first concert you went to? I love that.
That's an amazing question. I might steal that.
What is your first one?
So good.
What is your first one?
Yeah, so it was 1995, and it was 1996, and it was the Smashing Pumpkins in Albuquerque, New Mexico.
Very cool. Mine was Kiss, Madison Square Garden, 1977.
Oh,
it warped a 12-year-old boy's mind. Let me tell you what. So that's where I started.
Amazing.
Yeah. But anyway, so we talk about this from a communication standpoint, but now that we're in this virtual space, you talk about the storytelling, you talk about the icebreaker, you talk about the joke. But this is a skill now that we have to learn, is how to do this in the virtual space. How do we pick up this communication skill if it's something we're not used to?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So here's something that's super tactical. It's very, very tactical, but I think everybody should kind of realize it. You know how you heard, I remember going out for a friend of mine who was this comedy writer. She was actually a very successful writer on Schitt's Creek, the show, which I highly recommend to people to watch. But I can remember hanging out with her and some TV actors. And we were at a comedy club, and the actors come in, we're sort of having some drinks. And I could not believe how skinny the actors were, because they did not look this skinny in real life. So the camera, of course, and then she's like, well, Eleanor, the camera adds like 25 pounds to people. And so in order to look slim, they're typically that's one of the things that's going on. So I was like, oh, okay. So the rule I want everyone to think about is cameras add weight and remove energy. So one of the big things for leaders, like if you are used to being with people around a table, if you are used to being at a podium where people can connect with you, they can feel that energy, they have that live connection, understand that in a Zoom environment, cameras add weight, which we don't, that's not a big deal, but they remove energy. And that is a big deal when it comes to forging connection. So one of the things that I want people to think about is to consider allowing themselves to be a little bit more animated. Sit up straighter. Think about your expression. Are you smiling? Like, are you connecting? Are you making eye contact? Are you injecting your communication with a little bit more energy than that's why people talk about, Zoom fatigue. One of the reasons, yes, it's tiring to be on a screen all day, but it's also you're around what feels like a lot of low energy meetings. And so for leaders, if you're not able to captivate to a certain degree, that's tough, right? Especially when people aren't feeling good. So I think that it's super tactical, but that's something that I think is very, very important, like just injecting a little bit of extra energy and knowing that that can happen. And then I think the second thing is to really be thinking through a short anecdote, like using story a little bit more, like connecting with story. So if you're going into a situation and you need to, you need to make a point or you need to inspire, thinking through a potential story that you could share. Again, what we're looking for are those authentic connection points.
I think that's really great advice. And that's what makes you one of the, you may be the coach to coaches as well. So I think that's pretty awesome. But Eleanor, so I want people to know a little bit more about you. So I want to talk about your podcast and let people know where they can hear it, but give them the premise of what you try to do with the show. And then you're also doing LinkedIn, a LinkedIn live show. Let's go ahead and talk about that as well, because again, it's important that people, the people who are listening out there, I'm not the kind of person where I don't want to share the audience, and, we've got to be able to find the resources in our fields that are able to motivate us. And Eleanor does a great job. She motivates me all the time. But let's talk about your show. Tell people what it's about and how they can find it.
So my show is called Power, Presence, Position. And this is a show, my audience are, high caliber women leaders. So I'm sure there's a bunch of those, and really smart men. Let's be honest, really smart men too, like Chris. Yeah. And so that show is really all about tactics, strategies, insight, inspiration stories from really powerful women leaders about how they find and unleash their voice, how they build an authentic brand, and how they really embrace power. We won't necessarily get into it here today, but I actually think the next dimension of, women's leadership is not really about leadership. I think women are great leaders, as are men. The next thing, for us as women to be taking a look at is actually not our relationship to leadership, but our relationship to power. That's a whole other conversation. So that's Power, Presence, Position. And then on LinkedIn, I have a LinkedIn live show where I interview top level professionals and share insights about trends and research that are impacting women leaders and the organizations that they work with. So those are the two places to find me.
And those are some really great shows. I love that power position. And I think that when we think about that from an executive presence standpoint, it's really is how do we define those and how do we make those, part of our ability to lead and talk about. Yeah. So, you are a great resource. I love having you here, and we've got to do a lot more talking. It can't be a year where you come back on a show. You've got to be able to come back a little bit more. Otherwise, I'm going to have to come up there to Toronto and find you. Are you in Toronto? Is that where you live?
I'm on the East Coast. I'm right above Maine in Nova Scotia.
Okay, that's kind it's all Canada to me. It makes no
It's all Canada. That's right.
This is the northern border. We don't want to put a wall up on it. So all right, Eleanor. So if folks want to get in touch with you, what's the best way they can do that?
Oh, the best way is to, you know what? I love email. I'm old school emailer. How about Eleanor@eleanorbeaton.com?
That's an easy one to remember. And one more thing, I mean, I forgot to touch on it, and I don't want to close until I do. You do a lot of great seminars as well that are very, very in-depth. They're very, very focused. They're very, very thought-provoking. You got anything coming up?
Yeah, we do. Actually, we have a seminar coming up. Well, it's not till January. It's not till
That's
January.
good,
The next one,
time.
it's all right.
Yeah, I mean, because people got a plan, right?
Right. And so it's called, I can't, something, it's got a very cool headline, How to Find Your Authentic Marketing Voice.
Very nice.
Yeah.
Very nice. Well, if you need any guest speakers or anything, let me know. I'm happy to join.
100%.
And, I got to tell you, come on back. Let's talk about some power stuff. I think that would be a great show to discuss. And you are a leader in the field, and I consider you the top female professional out there for mentorship. And if you're looking for a great mentor, Eleanor Beaton is the one that I'm giving my recommendation to.
Thank you so much. It's an honor to be here.
And everybody out there, I got to tell you, man, this was a great little show, man. She gave us a lot of things we talked about. We've got to be able to think about how we're dealing with things in this time of pandemic, and how we're seeing ourselves, and how we deal with the stress, how we deal with the anxiety, how we think about how we're going to start to move out of this pandemic. And I want to thank everybody for joining us once again on the Ultimate Leadership Podcast. I look forward to chatting with everyone again real soon. For my guest, Eleanor Beaton, I'm Chris Cebollero. Thanks again.